Are you ready? We went to a business of destruction. Anyways, so going a little bit further, but it's a pleasure to be back. I haven't given a class for such a long time, at least Monday nights. I think since the beginning of the year, honestly, maybe I gave a class for a couple of weeks, but then hopefully we're going to restart. You know what we're going to discuss? I hope I didn't do it a couple of years ago. I don't remember, but we're going to talk about actually how dear every Jew is to God. But it takes a long time to get to it. This week's portion talks about the plagues, right? I hope I didn't bother anybody with the politics. Well, just a joke, right? Anyways, it talks about the 10 plagues. And we actually find a major difference between the first 9 plagues and plague number 10. Let's go through the plagues, very quickly. The first one was that, if I don't know it, please correct me, that all the water turned into blood in Egypt. Number 2 was the frogs that came and attacked them. Number 3, the lice. Number 4 was the wild animals, right? Then there was the hail. No, that's then was the shchin, which is the boils. And then you had, no, 1 second. No, I'm sorry. After, okay, let's go. Datzach is dam tzvadia kinim. So we said the first 3. Arab is the wild animals. Then there's the pestilence. And then there's the shchin, which is the boils. And then you had the hail. And then you got the locust. And then there was darkness. And the last thing was the killing of the firstborn. But there was a major difference. The first 9, the Jews didn't need a special sign to be protected. When the frogs attacked, they knew where to go, somehow. Like, the blood didn't enter the city of Goshen. The Jews didn't have any blood. It was all water. When the lice attacked, they only attacked the Egyptians. Whatever, all of them, they didn't need a special sign. Like, the darkness was only for the Egyptians. The Torah says the Jews had light. When it comes to number 10, so then God says you have to make 2 signs for you not to get punished, because the angel of death came. He was going to kill all the firstborn. And it says really the firstborn doesn't differentiate between not the firstborn, the angel of death, who is in charge, does not differentiate between righteous and non-righteous people. He would kill everybody. So the Jews needed a special sign. What's that special sign? They had to bring the Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, and put the blood on the doorposts. And then also they had to circumcise themselves, all the men, because the men or the boys in Egypt, they didn't circumcise themselves except the tribe of Levi. To be able to eat the sacrifice, you have to be circumcised. So they had to actually do the circumcision too. According to one of the Mefarshim, they didn't only put the blood of the sacrifice on the doorpost, they had to put the blood of the circumcision too. Otherwise, the angel wouldn't differentiate between good and evil. So the question is, why by the first 9 he was able to differentiate? By number 10 he couldn't differentiate? What happened? He lost his senses? The first 9 it was good. The Jews didn't need sign. Number 10 they do need a sign. So honestly, to understand this, we have to understand why the 10 plagues. What was the purpose of the 10 plagues? So in the Torah we find 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is in this week's portions, that every time Moses gives a warning that the plagues will come, he says, in order that you shall know there is God. Because the Egyptians denied the existence of God. They said everything is nature. Even if there is a God, he left the world. He's not really interested in running the world. So then Moshe comes and says, no, these plagues prove that God is still involved. That was reason number 1. But we find actually 400 years before this, when Abraham was making a covenant with God, God tells Abraham that your children will be enslaved in a land that doesn't belong to them, meaning land of Egypt. And I will actually punish the nation that will enslave them. But it doesn't say what the punishments are. Rashi writes down the commentary of the Torah that God punished them with the 10 plagues. So we have in the Torah 2 reasons. A very open reason, the reason of the plagues is to prove to the Egyptians that there is a God. And then the way it says before, when he was speaking to Abraham, 400 years before that God is going to punish the nation that's going to slave the Jews. And what's the punishment? Rashi says the 10 plagues. Now my question is, which one is the main reason? Both of them exist, but which one is the main reason of the plagues? Is it to prove that there is a God? Or is it to punish the Egyptians for the evil things that they did, the hurt? other human beings. So here actually there's a novelty that one of the commentators says, and that's the difference of the first 9 plagues and plague number 10. The first 9 plagues, the main reason was to prove that there is a God, not so much to punish the Egyptians. But plague number 10, which was to kill the firstborn, the main reason was to punish the Egyptians. Why do you make such a differentiation? It's very simple. Because when you want to prove to somebody that there is a God, so you make the guy suffer, but he has to stay alive to know that there is a God. If the guy gets killed, he's not even here to understand that there is a God. It doesn't make sense. You have to have him alive to understand there is a God. So the first 9 plagues, they didn't really get killed that much. Blood came, they had a choice to buy water from the Jews. The frogs didn't kill them. The boils didn't kill them. Regarding the wild animals, there's a dispute if they were killed or not. But they really stayed alive. Because the main reason was to prove that there is a God. But by number 10, all the firstborn died. Not only that, Rashi says, what happens if the firstborn didn't live in that house? He got married and he left. So the oldest died. What happens if there was infidelity? And in Egypt there was such thing. They were not such nice people like today's world. That hopefully once we get married, you're faithful to your own spouse. So they used to go with other men, with other women, and they were like firstborns, maybe not to the mother, but to the new father. Or maybe not to the father, but to the new lady that he took. So actually in one house, he had so many people dying at the same time. And actually the Torah says it. When the Egyptians were pushing the Jews out, they said, please get out because all of us will die. Why did they say all of us? The Torah says, Kulanu metim, we are all going to die. Why would they all die? Moses said only the firstborn. Because they saw many people dying, although they were not firstborn in their mind. But either they were actually to different parents or they were the oldest in the house. So now we understand the difference. Why the first 9 plagues, the Jews didn't need a sign. What was the purpose of the first 9? To prove that there is a God. Right? The Jews don't need a proof. They know there is a God. Because Abraham taught it to them, Isaac taught it to them, Yaakov taught it to them. They always believed in a God. So what are you going to bring? The plagues to prove that there is a God? The Jews didn't need that. That's why there was no problem. But when it came to plague number 10, that God comes and says, you know what, I'm going to punish the Egyptians for their sins. So the Jews had plenty of sins too. That's why it says the angel of death came to God and he said, okay, till now, I was quiet. Whoever was in charge of punishing them. Because the purpose of the plagues was to prove that there is a God. The Jews knew that there is a God. But now that you're coming to punish them for their sins, well, I think Jews are sin-free. They also have sins. So they should get punished. So what did God do here? What God did is, he said, I'll give them 2 signs. One is the circumcision, and the other one is that they have to bring the sacrifice, the Pesach sacrifice, so then they will not get hurt, right? Well, at least we answered part of the question. That's what plague number 10 was different. Is that clear or I'm getting boring? If I'm getting bored, please let me know. Do you have any questions?
Were there any Egyptians that believed the Jews and would also
That believed in God?
that they would also do the circumcision and
They didn't do circumcision, but the ones that didn't die, they were not firstborn or something. A lot of them converted and came out with Moshe. And these were the guys that made the golden calf. They didn't really do proper conversion.
yeah.
But Moshe loved them so much that he, loved God so much that he wanted to bring everybody to believe in God. So he took them without too many questions. He didn't vet them too good. Yeah, I'm sure that Obama and Biden would really appreciate what Moses did without vetting them too good. He just brought them. Yeah. Whatever, that was, but at that time they didn't circumcise them. Maybe they did afterwards, once they came out with Moshe. So this actually explains why plague number 10 was different. Is that clear? If there's any questions, please ask. I usually don't get angry.
So
Go ahead.
So certainly the first 9, nobody died.
I didn't say, but by most of them they didn't. Regarding the wild animals, there's a dispute. But according to this explanation, they didn't get killed. They were just afraid.
That's yeah.
But the only question is by the wild animals. Because by everything else, they did not die. By the blood, they could get water from the Jews if they bought it. The frogs didn't kill them. The lice don't kill.
The hail.
Pestilence. Oh, the hail only killed if you went to the field. If you're in the house, you didn't get killed. The pestilence only killed the animals. The grasshoppers, they destroy the vegetation. The darkness, nobody died.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it was only the last one. Now the question is, so if the Jews have these two signs, they still have sins. So how did this make the angel of death quiet? Right? Okay, the Jews deserve to get punished because they're sinful. So God gave them two commandments, but they still have their sins. They should get punished too. They should lose their firstborn also. So here, actually, we're going to go to something very deep. I want everybody please to pay attention to it. I'm sure you have experienced that because we all have parents, and one day we will all, God willing, become parents. And we're going to see there's two types of relationships between people. There's a certain relationship that makes sense. It's very logical. For example, I like some person because I know his values, and actually I could get a lot of benefits from him. So therefore, I want to have a connection with that person, right? Well, that's even in business. Who's your favorite teacher? The one that really cared about you to teach you. That's your favorite teacher. The best, business partners or whatever people that you do business with are the ones that don't give you a hard time. In the Persian community, I don't do business with Persians, only with non-Persians. I don't believe that. I don't know why. There's always nice people everywhere. But anyways, so it's worth it to have a relationship, right? What happens if there's no more reason for the relationship? I don't do business with that guy anymore. Or he's not my favorite teacher anymore. Or I thought he's nice, but he's really not nice. Then the relationship is totally destroyed. There's a certain relationship that is not logical at all. It doesn't make any sense. There's a certain love that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The most obvious one is self-love. Do we love ourselves because we're the greatest people in the world?
Some people would say yes.
Yeah, because they have to
They
say.
have problems, but some people would say yes.
But let's even if somebody was honest and he knows he's not the best person in the world, but he loves himself. Actually, the Gemara says the closest relative to a person is himself. The Gemara's language is Karov Adam Etzelatzman. A person is a relative to himself, the closest relative. Over there, I don't like myself because of my values. It's just natural. Doesn't make sense, but that's the way it is. We find a similarity to that, the love that parents have to their children. Right? When a child is born, we don't even know who or he or she is going to be. But have you seen the parents always hug them, they kiss them? When they grow up, because they see the value of the kid, they start loving him because of his values. He gets good grades. He's a nice kid. He's a very accomplished kid. But the truth is, even with that, deep down, they love the child without any reason because the child was part of them. There was actually a story in Israel. There was a Rosh Hashiva, a teacher, that he didn't like his child too much because he wanted his kid to become a Rosh Hashiva, a head of a yeshiva like himself. I know what they say, the biggest tragedy in Persian families? It used to be like that, if the kids don't become doctors or lawyers. Now it's not like that anymore, Baruch Hashem. They give the freedom to the kids to become whatever they want to be. There's actually a joke, I always say this. There was a mom, had two children in a stroller. So somebody says, oh my gosh, your kids are so cute. How old are they? I'm sure some of you guys know the joke. He says, yeah, the doctor is 3 years old and the lawyer is 2 years old. So already they decided what the child is going to be. But anyways, the point that I wanted to say, so this guy wanted his son to be a Rosh Hashiva, but he didn't. He wasn't studying. He wasn't interested in studying. But he had a student, that this student was tremendously involved in studying Torah. He always praised the student, but he put down his own child. So it looked like he liked the student more than his child. So the two were walking, the good student and his son, and a car crashed into them. Who do you think the father ran to save first? His child. Even though he was always putting him down. Because the love of the parent to a child is not logical. It's not because of his values. It's his child, he's to be part of them. So they love him. Even if God forbid, the kid is, God forbid, in the wrong path, he's into drugs. Or let's say if it's a child that for some reason has many, many handicaps. He's not 100% there. Sometimes the parents show even more love to him. Even though in his situation, physical situation, he can accomplish much. So there's these two types of relationships, a logical one and something which is totally illogical. Now, what relationship do we have with God? Jews have both of them. There's a relationship number one that makes sense because the Jews keep what God tells them to keep, God gives them reward. That's a regular one. If they don't keep what they're supposed to keep, so sometimes, we see God sends punishments. So this is the logical relationship. You do what you have to do, you get reward. You know what I'm saying? You do crime, you have to pay the time. But the truth is that even, let's say, if the Jews don't keep Torah and mitzvot, God forbid, there's definitely a connection. There's a deep love that God has for them. No question about it. The only problem is that the only way that you could reveal that is if the Jews do things that are beyond logic. You get what I'm saying? Even if you're sinners. But if you want to reveal that illogical love of God, you got to do something beyond logic. So what happens is the night of Pesach, God revealed his unconditional love to the Jewish people. He didn't love them because they keep Torah and mitzvot, because at that time the Jews were sinners in Egypt. He loved them beyond logic, but the Jews had to do a couple things to arouse that love. So God doesn't care what the angel of death says. So that to do mitzvot that don't make any sense. Logically, they don't make any sense. Now again, guys, what was one of the gods of the Egyptians?
Cat,
The calf or the sheep?
cats and dogs. Yeah.
No, it was the sheep, at least the firstborn of the sheep. Imagine if I'm going to walk into Middle East and I'm going to burn a Quran, what will happen to me? God forbid. What would happen to a person? They will kill it. They will destroy it. How could you do their holy book? You're going to burn it. You're not going to stay alive. So the Jews going and taking a sheep and sacrificing it, it made no sense. Logically, it's a scary thing to do. But because Moshe commanded them, with the word of God, God commands them to do it. The Jews did it. Go ahead.
Oh, didn't they do that every day?
The Jews didn't.
Jews were allowed to eat meat. Egyptians not really. Like,
Right. So I said some Mefarshim say only the firstborn was.
I meant,
And even not the firstborn sheep was a god to them, not all the sheep. But
I get it, but since even after Joseph died and then all moved to Goshen and they could eat animals, they
True,
still
but-
a long time.
But did they sacrifice it publicly?
The thing is, they still ate it.
They ate, but they didn't do it publicly.
Egyptians didn't care if it was public or not. They
No,
knew,
they
right?
did, because here what the Torah says is they had to take it and tie it to their bed for 4 days and keep them. And if the Egyptians asked them, they said, "We're going to destroy, actually slaughter your gods." This wasn't just regularly going in my backyard and slaughtering it.
Okay, so
That's what it looks like.
God.
Okay, so this was something which was totally illogical. Also, when it comes to circumcision, that really, it's something which is not logical at all. You know that the Muslims, the religious Muslims, they do circumcision at the age of 13 because their father, Ishmael, he circumcised himself at 13, right? And they actually say their circumcision is higher because the child at the age of 13 understands why, and he does it. But Jews do it when they're 8 days old. What does a kid understand? He has no choice to even say, "I don't want to get circumcised." But why do we do it at the age of 8 days old? Why don't we wait till 13? So one of the reasons that I brought that, because the connection of a Jew is much deeper than a logical connection. You're really internally connected to God. You hear that, boys? It's not because I understand what God is, I'm connected to God. Yeah, every Jew has a godly soul, is connected to God no matter what. So when he's 8 days old, and the blood is in the body, and the body is advanced that it could actually clog up the blood, whatever you call it, so then you do the circumcision. These two commandments show that the Jews' connection to God is beyond logic. Actually, when they brought the sacrifice, they didn't care what the Egyptians would say, something totally illogical. And then also the circumcision itself shows that the Jews connected to God beyond reason. You don't have to wait to understand God to get connected. You're internally connected. So this actually aroused the love of God that's beyond any condition. And that's why they didn't care to listen to the angel of death. So again, it was different. The purpose of the last plague was to punish the Jews. To punish the Egyptians. That's why the Satan came and he said the angel of death. He came and he complained and he said the Jews also deserve to get punished. So that somehow we have to arouse the love of God, which is beyond logic. Doesn't matter if the Jews are sinful or not, but we had to do something to arouse that love. We had to do something beyond logic. to reveal that type of love. I hope it was clear. But definitely it teaches us a few things. First of all, we have to know our values. Every human being is dear to God, no question about it. Definitely every Jew is very dear to God. I was actually today in Portola, there are like 70, 80 kids that show up for the Jewish club. So I asked the kid, do you really believe that God loves you? Jews? He says, of course I do. I said, yeah, I have a proof to that. My proof is this. Of course. The Jews, they have been persecuted for how many thousands of years? I guess from the birth of the Jews, right? The Romans came. They ruled the world for 300 years. They're not here anymore. They're assimilated. The Greeks came. They ruled the world for 200 years. They're not here anymore. Every nation that came, they came and they had good times. They ruled and they're gone. Jews have been persecuted for, I don't know, at least 1900 years since the destruction of the temple. And thank God we're still here. It really doesn't make any sense. So doesn't that prove that God loves you? It definitely makes that sense. We love God too. Sometimes He gives us hard times, but that doesn't mean He doesn't love us. Our parents give us hard times too. Which parent didn't give his child a hard time? At least in the child's mind. They mean well. They don't really give us a hard time. They try to discipline us. We think it's a hard time. Anyways, if you have any questions, guys, go ahead. Otherwise, we're going to go to the next part. No questions? Okay, we're going to go to the next part, God willing. The next part that we're going to discuss, that the Jews left Egypt in such haste. The Torah says the reason why we eat matzah the night of Pesach, why do we eat matzah, not bread? It says because our parents had no time to wait for the dough to rise. They had to rush. Yeah, I didn't want to be forgotten, so I came back.
It's amazing.
I'm just kidding.
Glad you're back.
What?
Glad you're back.
I'm glad myself that I'm back. Thank God. Now I'm going to know your name is Rod Parvar.
Oh, you got it.
No, that's Siradman. You see, for 2 weeks my brain's worked. It's a miracle.
You're getting younger.
I don't know. But it depends. Sometimes the computer works, then for 2 weeks doesn't work. That's my problem. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. Depends how many mitzvot I do. But anyways, so the Jews had to rush out of Egypt. They didn't even have time to make sure that the dough rises. So now, guys, how long does it take for the dough to rise? I know it takes 18 minutes to become chametz, but to make bread, you have to make it really rise a lot. How many hours does it take? So what?
In the oven?
No. Before, when you put the yeast in there.
Like a few hours?
Yeah, so it's either 3 to 4 hours. Now, again, I never make it, but my wife does that, so she tells me 3 to 4 hours. Actually, there is a book which is called Where I Stand. It's written by Rabbi Yosef. I think his name is Yosef. Last name is Goldman. He's a rabbi in South Africa. He was sent by the Lubavitch Rebbe in the 70s to South Africa. She has a book, Where I Stand. So he says, I asked my wife, and he said it takes 3 to 4 hours. So the Jews were in Egypt for 210 years. They didn't have another 4 hours to wait. Why did God rush them out? Okay, wait till they make the bread, they go out. So the traditional answer that they give is because, the commentators say, because, I don't know, God was afraid, I can't say the words, but the worry was that the Egyptians might change their mind. If you don't leave now, they're going to say, sorry, we're not going to let the Jews go out. So we had to rush, hoping that the Egyptians wouldn't change their mind. But that's a little bit hard to understand because the Egyptians got 10 plagues. That same night, they just lost all the firstborn. They're going to change their mind? If anything, they said, just get out, man. Get out of our country. We had enough from you. So that's why many commentators say we were not worried about the Egyptians changing their mind. It was actually they were afraid that the Jews might change their mind. Have you ever seen someone that is in a very bad situation, but is afraid to go out of his comfort zone because who knows what the unknown will bring? When the Jews were in Egypt, they had a horrible time, but at least they got dried bread. At least they had a roof over their head. Now we're going to go into the desert. What are we going to have? Where are we going to get food from? Right? Where are we going to have a roof over our heads? They didn't know. The clouds were not there yet when they left Egypt. So they didn't know they were going to have the clouds around them. Go ahead.
So did the Egyptians eventually change their mind?
The Egyptians changed their minds 7 days later because they were tricked. I could explain that and then they got drowned.
Yeah.
I'll explain at the end what happened. That he got tricked.
That part. Right?
No, that was 7 days later
Oh,
for a different reason. As we're going to see how God tricked them.
I thought they were like hours behind that.
No, this was 7 days later. I mean, it was 3 days later, but they chased them and they got it 7 days later. I'm going to explain that. Yeah, it was a very good question. Anyway, so what happens is, like if somebody who has a slave mentality, he's suffering, but he says, at least I have a master that feeds me. But if I'm going to go somewhere that who knows, so they wouldn't want to leave. So it says God was afraid that if the Jews would stay too long, Egyptians came, get out, we don't want to hear. So they were excited to leave. If they would have waited 4 hours to make the dough rise, they would have changed their mind. Maybe we don't want to go out of Egypt. So God had to rush them. Once they came out, it was too late. I could actually testify to that. When I was in Iran, I lived there for 12 years. Anybody here was born in Iran? Did you see like all the wars and stuff, or you were too young? Or there was no wars in your time?
It was no worse.
Okay, when I was in Iran, that was at the beginning of the revolution. I remember, honestly, I was just there. I was there when Shah left, the king left. And then for a few months, he left somebody to be after him. His name was Mr. Bakhtiyar, whatever his name was. And then he also ran away because he was too afraid for his life. And actually, the Muslims killed him in Europe after a while. And then Khomeini came. So 30 days after Khomeini came, I left. But I remember during those chaotic times, people would go and break, the doors of the banks and go steal all the cash. There was, these department stores. It was called the department store of Kurosh. Actually, whatever, I think Shah made it, I don't know what it was. Kurosh is King Cyrus. And after the whole big history of Iran, they were going and looting it. Just like what happened by the fires that some people try to go loot places. And, little kids had guns in the streets. I was like, I hated it. I have no feelings for that country. I'm sorry that I'm saying it. But I was traumatized as a kid. So I wanted to leave. My parents said, "Where?" I said, "No, mommy, send me out. I want to get out of Iran." And I really was excited to go. The moment I came into the airplane, I started crying. Why did I leave Iran? Was I crazy? Where am I going to? But again, now that I'm looking back, thank God that I left. So saying I was in the rush to leave. If I would have waited maybe a little bit longer, I would say, just stay. So that's actually the nature of a person. So, I'm saying once I left, it was too late. That's it. I was in the airplane. I couldn't get up. Thank God we grew up normal, even though we didn't have our parents next to us. It's a miracle, seriously. Living in a dormitory, like, I don't know, it was like an army. I hope I'm normal. I don't know. I think so. I hope so. At any rate, so they were afraid that the Jews will change their mind. Isn't that a story about all of us? There's a statement in Judaism that it says we should never get used to things that we get used to. We fall into a comfort zone, right? And we're afraid to change because I don't know what the future has, even though my situation right now is not good. So the Pesach teaches us, saying many times we have to get out of our comfort zone. Don't stay where you are if it's not comfortable. I'm saying in a good way. I don't mean to get in the worst situation. But again, and when the opportunity comes in front of us, we should actually take the opportunity. Has it ever happened? You have had older guys, older boys or girls. They say, what? I had an opportunity to get a job and I missed it. I had a time to go date a boy or a girl, and then I didn't do it. I missed it. Look, now I messed up. I'm not getting married. So whenever opportunities come, we should actually take the opportunity and improve ourselves. Just like this is true in physical things, in financial things, in spirituality is very true also. We don't always get these opportunities. We might be in our comfort zone. Who wants to get up early in the morning to go study Torah? Who's in the mood of getting up early, putting on tefillin? Let me go to sleep. Why should I rush home before Shabbat to light the candles? Who cares, Just go drink a beer, get home a little bit late, tell somebody else to light it for you. So again, whenever opportunities come, just like in physical life, if you get a good job, opportunity, go get it. In spirituality, we have to do the same thing too. That's one thing from this week's portion. Sometimes we call the challenges opportunities. Is that true? But you can't always do that. There's a joke. If a guy has drinking challenges, Can Israel have many opportunities for drinking? Please don't. So sometimes challenges are opportunities, but sometimes they're not at all. Anyway, so that was the second thing that I wanted to discuss with you. Any questions before they go?
Yeah, please, let's talk about the 7 days. I thought the Egyptians were just hours behind. Like a whole
Oh no. So what happens is, thank you for reminding me. So when the Jews left, right, Pharaoh was actually kicking them out because his firstborn child died. The Midrash says Pharaoh himself was a firstborn. He was afraid that he's going to die too. So he told the Jews leave. Now Moses in the beginning said, we're going to go out of Egypt only for 3 days. Have you come across that? It says we're going to go out derech shloshet yamim only for 3 days. And I mean, his excuse was, we're going to go in front of Mount Sinai. We have to bring sacrifices. We can't do it in Egypt because this is your gods, these sheep. And he didn't say we're going to come back or not. He just said we want to go for 3 days. Correct? Now, why didn't he say straight that we're going to go out and leave forever? God could do it. So one of the answers that actually, the commentators say, if they would have said we're going to go forever, Pharaoh would never give them permission. He would keep them. So they said we're going to go out for 3 days. So he's going to think that, God gave them permission only for 3 days, not more. So after the end of the third day, the Jews were leaving Egypt. On the third day, they actually turned back. Now Pharaoh sent soldiers behind them. So okay, 3 days are over. Go back to Egypt. So the Jews said, no, we're not going back. But they went 1 day back. And where did they actually encamp? In front of one of the idols. That was a few days from the border of Egypt. And that was the only idol that stayed. Because in the Torah we read, actually it is a verse in the Torah. On the day that the firstborn died, all their gods also melted or they decayed and everything. Because the Pasuk says, Ubechol Elohei Mitzrayim. And all the gods of Egypt, I'm going to make punishments too. So what happened to the gods of Egypt? So it says, the firstborn of the animals died, and then also if they had any idols, they actually got destroyed also. But this one stayed. So this is on the third day, right? And they're actually encamped in front of the idol. So the soldiers go back to Egypt and they tell Pharaoh the Jews don't want to come back. I know where they are. They're supposed to go against idols, but they're actually encamping in front of the idol. So Pharaoh thought the Jews are actually not listening to God to come back. So because they went against God, God removed himself from them. And now they're actually trapped by that idol. Okay? So then afterwards, the Jews continue traveling, and Pharaoh comes after them. He catches them in the 6th day. And then the night of going to the 7th, that's when they actually go into the Red Sea. And God splits the Red Sea for them. So they came back because God tricked them. They came after the Jews. Because they thought the Jews were disobeying God. And that's what they're encamped in front. Again, this is not clear in the Torah. You need the commentaries that they explain it. So that happened 7 days later. There was like a distance of 3 days between them, right? Or 2.5 days. Clear, people? Okay. This Parshat actually talks about the putting on of tefillin. Right? Guys, tefillin is very, very important. We're going to discuss it. Why is it very important actually putting on tefillin, especially these days? It's actually the last portion of the week, of this week's Parsha. Simply, why do we put on tefillin? What's the point of tefillin? So simply speaking, in the tefillin you have 4 sections of the Torah. The first portion is Shema Yisrael, that says there is one God. Second part is the second part of Shema Yisrael, V'hayim Shamoah, that it talks about keeping of the commandments. You haven't looked at the head tefillin? It has like 4 parts, because in each section you have a different part of the Torah. Shema Yisrael, V'hayim Shamoah. And then the other 2 is the Parshat of Kadesh Li. That, if you put on tefillin, that's the first thing that we read. So the reason why we put on the tefillin, first of all, it talks about that there is one God. So we express our belief in one God. It also talks about the exodus from Egypt, which actually tells us that we do believe that God still runs the world. It's not that he left the world and he just lets nature, as they say, Mother Nature, run everything. There's no such thing. God still actually involves himself. Why do we put it on the hand and on the head? So halacha says because we put it on the left hand next to the heart. You can't put it on this side. You have to put it somewhere. When you put your arm down, it's touching your heart. People that are lefties, they put it on the right hand, but again, it has to be next to your heart on this side. You have your heart on the right side. Isn't maybe the lefties have the heart on the other side? I don't know. I'm just kidding. It actually reminds me. Somebody came to the Lubavitch Rebbe once, nothing to do with this, and he said in Judaism, right is the more important. Right hand, right foot. So why did God put the heart on the left side? It should have been on the right side. So the guy didn't have an answer. So the Rebbe told him, because the heart is on your left side, because it's on the right side of the other guy. You know what I'm saying? If you're standing opposite me, my left hand touches your right hand. So the purpose of a heart is to actually have a feeling for you. It's on the right side of the other guy. That's what the Lubavitch Rebbe answered. A very interesting answer. Anyways, going back regarding concept of tefillin, what do you put on the left hand next to the heart? Good.
Why do left-handed people have different feeling? Like, is it?
The reason is because the Torah says put it on your weaker hand. And he's teaching us that we have to work on our weaknesses. So you put it on the weaker hand. A righty, the left is his weaker hand. The left is the right hand is his weaker hand. To show that you have to work on our deficiencies. But anyways, why next to the heart? Because this is a place of our emotions, the heart. And the brain is where the soul is, our mind. And by putting on tefillin, we're actually declaring that I'm subjugating my heart and my mind in the way of God. Okay? That's a simple reason of putting on tefillin. Actually, the Gemara says when Jewish people put on tefillin, the enemies of the Jews are too afraid to attack them. And it goes on the tefillin of the head, because the tefillin of the head has a shin on top of it, right? The shin is the first letter of God's name. Shin Daled Yud, the name which is on the mezuzah, right? Shin Daled Yud, and the shin is on the head. So when the Jews put on tefillin, God is revealed upon their head, and then the enemies are afraid to attack them. The Gemara says that. When every one of you guys puts on tefillin every day, it's actually protecting every Jew wherever they are in the world, especially our brothers in Israel. So actually in the year 1967, before Six-Day War started, everybody knew there's going to be a war. They knew it was going on in the world. Actually, many people said, many big politicians, that Israel is going to be wiped out from the map of the world. Because the plan was that, the enemies were going to attack. Every parent, many parents, they wanted their kids to get out of Israel. The Americans that they sent their kids to the yeshivas in Israel, they were begging for their kids to come back because they said Israel is in sakana gedola, in a big danger. But then the Rebbe said there's going to be nitzachon gadol, there's going to be big victory. So we know at that time, a few months before, he told all these yeshiva boys, you got to go in the streets and put on tefillin on people. And they did. It was a lot of success. When I was younger, I used to go to downtown on Santee Street. In 1980s, people were not Shomer Shabbat yet. Honestly, in 3 hours on Santee Street, you would get 40, 50 tefillin every Friday. And people wanted to put it on. Now, thank God they do it on their own. They don't need us to go to them to put on tefillin. But again, the point of tefillin is because God's name is on top of your head, that actually makes other nations afraid. So before the Six-Day War, the Rebbe asked everybody to go out and put on tefillin. The Syrians in 67, I think, when they were attacking from the north, suddenly they were afraid and they left because they saw the Israelis were not there and they were coming easily down by Golan Heights. So they thought maybe the Jews made a trap for them. So they were afraid, they ran away. So the Lubavitch Rebbe said that was because of the effect of tefillin, that every Jew in the street was putting on tefillin at that time. So please, guys, I hope every one of you guys puts on tefillin. If you do put on tefillin, fine. If you sometimes forget, please make sure you put it on every day. And please make sure that your friends put it on too. Just like you want everything good for yourself, you want it for your friends also. And Be'ezrat Hashem, again, the hostages are coming back. I hope all of them will come out. And Israel is going to be victorious. Thank you for listening, everyone. I guess we haven't gone to Tel Aviv for a long time. We missed that. Guys, I'm doing a little bit difficult, so I think last time I told you guys, please order some sandwiches, right? No big plates, please forgive me. So let me just call him. I hope he's there. I hope they're open. Tel Aviv. I love Jerusalem. Tel Aviv is a good city too.
Hopefully we go back this summer.